Below is a transcript of testimony in the Japanese Parliament that was broadcast live nationwide on NHK television. The Member of Parliament talking about 9/11 is Yukihisa Fujita from the Democratic Party of Japan. After the testimony, Mr. Fujita says he got lots of phone calls from other members of Parliament thanking him for having the bravery to bring up 9/11 in Parliament. He also got one death threat. Meanwhile, I asked the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan to invite him for a press conference. Each of several attempts to send an email to the FCCJ about this resulting in my Hotmail account freezing and my computer crashing. Also, it was amazing to watch the shameless verbal acrobatics of American corporate journalists trying to prevent this press conference from taking place. Fortunately, journalists from the rest of the world supported a press conference, and we will try to get it to take place as soon as possible. The secret government's control of Japan is falling apart. A few weeks ago, one of Japan's leading commercial TV networks also broadcast a 9/11 truth program during prime time. One other national network and several local networks have also broadcast such programs. The people of Japan do not want to finance genocidal mass murderers anymore. Head of the committee, we will now begin the first session of the Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee. We will now start discussing the special anti-terror law. We now call on Mr. Yukihisa Fujita. Fujita standing in front of microphone. This will be the last televised broadcast of this committee, so I would like to talk about the origin of the war on terrorism, which was the attacks of 9/11. On September 11th of 2002, I went to a theater house for a charity concert to help build a school in Afghanistan. They chose to have the charity concert on that day as a gesture of respect for the dead. Normally 9/11 commemorative events are for the people who died in New York, but the people who held this event decided that more innocent people died as a result of 9/11 in Afghanistan than in New York. So they built a great school near where the statue of Buddha was destroyed in Bamiyan. The name of the school is the School of Hope. They also lit candles to commemorate the dead both in Afghanistan and in New York in the year 2002, 1 year after the attacks. So, when discussing these anti-terror laws, we should ask ourselves, what was 9/11? What is terrorism? So today, I would like to talk about the beginning of the war on terror. So, I would like to ask the people who call this law an anti-terror law to realize that the biggest victim of the war on terrorism has been Afghanistan, so I believe helping the people of Afghanistan should be our biggest priority. I would like to ask Mr. Inuzuka about this. Tadashi Inuzuka walking to the microphone. As Mr. Fujita says, the main purpose of this law is to provide peace and security to Afghanistan. And, as he says, the biggest sufferers have been the people of Afghanistan. Afghanistan has 1.7 times the land area of Japan and 20-some million people live there. Also, because of a drought on the Eurasian continent, close to 5 million have died due to water shortages. Even now 1 million people live close to the main battlegrounds. So, the main purpose is to provide stability to those war zones. So in that context, what should Japan do? However, instead of providing support by providing fuel to the U.S. forces, we at the Democratic Party have decided that providing water is more important. The philosophy behind our anti-terror law is to get the ruling party to help deal with this problem. Head of the committee, Mr. Fujita. Mr. Fujita, I would like to talk about the origins of this war on terrorism. You may recall that in November I asked you if terrorism was war or if it was a crime. And the whole start of this war on terrorism was 9/11. What I want to know is if this event was caused by Al-Qaeda or not. So far, the only thing the government has said is that we think it was caused by Al-Qaeda because President Bush told us so. We have not seen any real proof that it was Al-Qaeda. I would like to know why the Prime Minister thinks it was the Taliban who was responsible for 9/11. Committee Chief, I want to ask the Prime Minister because he was Chief Cabinet Officer at the time. Prime Minister Fukuda, since the attacks we have communicated with the U.S. government and other governments at different levels and exchanged information. According to secret information obtained by our government and reports put together by foreign governments, the 9/11 attacks were carried out by the international terrorist organization known as Al-Qaeda. Mr. Fujita. So, you are talking about both secret and disclosed information. My question is, has the Japanese government carried out its own investigation using the police and other resources? It is a crime, so surely an investigation needs to be carried out. When a Japanese journalist was shot in Myanmar, you carried out an investigation. In the same way, over 20 Japanese people died on 9/11, so surely the government carried out its own investigation and decided that Al-Qaeda was responsible. So, what kind of investigation did you carry out? At the time you were Chief Cabinet Secretary, so surely you would know better than anybody, so I want to ask you about your investigation. Prime Minister Fukuda. After the 9/11 attacks, the National Police Agency sent an emergency anti-terror team to New York. They met with U.S. government officials and gathered information about missing Japanese. Mr. Fujita. So you are saying over 20 people died as a result of a crime, and most of those people were working in New York. Also, there were some Japanese who died in the 4 airplanes that were hijacked. I would like to know exactly how many people died in the buildings and how many died in the airplanes. I also want to know how you confirmed this. I would like the Foreign Minister to answer for me. Foreign Minister Masahiko Komura is standing right in front of microphone. We found the bodies of over a dozen Japanese following the simultaneous terror attacks carried out on September 11, 2001. We were also informed about the death of 11 more people by the U.S. authorities. In total, 24 Japanese died in those attacks. Of those, 2 were in the airplanes. Mr. Fujita. I would like to ask what flights the 2 Japanese who died in the airplanes were on and how you determined who they were. If the Foreign Minister does not know, it is okay to get a bureaucrat to answer. Foreign Ministry Division Chief Ryoji Tanizuki. Since this is a question of fact, I will answer. As the Foreign Minister said, of the 24 people who died, 2 were on the airplanes. One of them was on United Flight 93 and the other was on American Airlines Flight 11. As for how we know this, well, I do not have the information in front of me, but we were told by U.S. authorities and, in general, they use DNA testing. So we believe that is how we know about those 2 people. Mr. Fujita. So you are saying you do not know because you do not have the documents. Also, you say you believe there was DNA testing but you do not know. So what I want to say today is that this was a crime and crimes are supposed to be investigated. So the government needs to inform the victims' families of the results of their investigation. Also, instead of just observing the anniversary of 9/11 every year, you must be gathering information and reacting to it. So, during the past 6 years, have you been supplying the families of the deceased with information? I would like to ask the Foreign Minister to answer. Foreign Minister Masahiko Komura. So you do not want to ask any more about how we confirmed the deaths of Japanese but want to know about reports to the victims' families? We provided the families with information about the bodies and about compensation funds. Also, for the 13 Japanese whose remains we found, we helped the families deal with the bodies. We also financial support visits to the World Trade Center site for the families on every anniversary. Mr. Fujita. Since I do not have much time, I would like to ask about the suspicious information being uncovered and the doubts people worldwide are having about the events of 9/11. Many of these doubters are very influential people. In such circumstances, I believe the Japanese government, which claims the attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda, should be providing the victims' families with this new information. In that context, I would like to ask several questions. First of all, I would like to get all members of the committee to look at this panel and look at the pictures I have provided you with. This is concrete evidence in the form of photographs and other types of information. The first photograph has computer graphics attached to show how large the plane that hit the Pentagon was. A 757 is quite a large airplane with a width of 38 meters. So as you can see, even though such a large plane hit the Pentagon, there is only a hole that is too small for the airplane. This is a photograph taken of firemen at work, and you can also see there is no damage of the sort an airplane that large should make. I would also like you to look at the lawn in front and notice that there are no airplane parts on it. Let us now look at the third picture, which is also of the Pentagon, taken from a US TV news report, has captions that show the roof of the Pentagon is still intact. Again, even though a huge airplane is supposed to have hit, there is not enough corresponding damage. Now let us move to the next photograph. Here is a photograph of a hole. As Minister Komura knows, the Pentagon is a very strong building with many walls. Yet the airplane has pierced them. But as you know, airplanes are made of the lightest possible material. An airplane made of such light material could not make a hole like that. Next, I would like to show a photograph of how the airplane hit the building. The airplane made a U-turn, avoiding the Defense Secretary's office and hitting the only part of the Pentagon that had been specially reinforced to withstand a bomb attack. Also, in the middle of page 5, we have a comment from a U.S. Air Force official. He says, "I have flown the two types of airplane used on 9/11, and I cannot believe it would be possible for someone who is flying one for the first time to be able to carry out such a maneuver." Also, as you know, they have not recovered the flight recorders from most of these 4 airplanes. Also, there were more than 80 security cameras at the Pentagon, but they have refused to release almost all of the footage. In any case, as you have just seen, there is no picture of the airplane or of its wreckage in any of these photographs. It is very strange that no such pictures have been shown to us. As you know, Japan's self-defense forces have their headquarters in Ichigaya. Can you imagine if an airplane hit a major city, if an hour and a half after an airplane hit New York, that an airplane could hit the Pentagon? In such a situation, how could our allies allow such an attack to take place? I would like the Defense Minister to answer this. Defense Minister Fuyushiba Ishiba. I have not prepared, so I will have to answer ad lib. If such a situation took place, then the Air Force would send fighters up to shoot down any airplanes. This is what happened with an attack on the German Constitutional Court. In the case of Japan, our reaction would depend on what kind of airplane it was, who is flying it, and what their purpose was. However, according to our laws, it might be hard to order an airplane to be shot down just because it was flying at a low level. We would probably have self-defense forces fly with it and ask for a cabinet decision. Since an airplane would have many people on board, we would have to discuss what to do. This happened a long time ago, but a Cessna airplane was flown into the house of a person called Yoshio Kodama. There was also an All Japan Airways flight bound for Hakodate that was hijacked and had the pilot killed. It would be best if such a thing never happened, but we need to prepare new laws for such situations and discuss them in Parliament. Mr. Fujita, since we are running out of time, I would like to present a new piece of evidence. Please look at this panel. The first picture is one you see often of the 2 towers that were hit by hijacked airplanes. I could understand if this happened right after the airplanes hit, but here we can see a large piece of material flying a large distance through the air. Some flew 150 meters. You can objects flying in this picture as if there was an explosion. Here is a picture I took from a book. This lets you see how far the objects flew. The third picture is of a fireman who was involved in the rescue, talking about a series of explosions in the building that sounded like a professional demolition. We cannot present video today, so I have written a translation of what the fireman said. Here is his saying: "It went boom 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 like explosions were going off." Here is something said by a Japanese research team of officials from the fire department and the construction ministry. They interviewed a Japanese survivor who said that while she was fleeing there were explosions. This testimony appears in a report prepared with the aid of the construction ministry and the fire department. Now I would like you to see the following picture. Normally it is said that the Twin Towers collapsed because they were hit by airplanes. However, 1 block away from the Twin Towers is building number 7. It can be seen in the following map, a block away from the WTC. This building collapsed 7 hours after the WTC buildings were attacked. If I could show you a video, it would be easy to understand, but take a look at this photograph. This is a 47-story building that fell in this manner. He drops an object to demonstrate. The building falls in 5 or 6 seconds. It is about the same speed as an object would fall in a vacuum. This building falls like something you would see in a kabuki show. Also, it falls while keeping its shape. Remember, it was not hit by an airplane. You have to ask yourself if a building could fall in that manner due to a fire after 7 hours. Here we have a copy of the 9/11 Commission report. This is a report put out by the U.S. government in July of 2004, but this report does not mention the collapse of the building I just described. It is not mentioned at all in here. He waves the book. FMA also issued a report, but they also failed to mention this building. Many people believe, especially after seeing a story about building number 7, that something is strange. Since this is an incident where many people died, people think it should be investigated. We are running out of time, but I would also like to mention the put options. Just before the 9/11 attacks, that is on September 6th, 7th and 8th, there were put options put out on the stocks of the two airlines, United and American, that were hit by hijackers. There were also put options on Merrill Lynch, one of the biggest WTC tenants. In other words, somebody had insider information and made a fortune selling put options of these stocks. The head of Germany's Bundesbank at the time, who is equivalent to the governor of the Bank of Japan, said there are lots of facts to prove the people involved in the terror attacks profited from insider information. He said there was lots of suspicious trading involving financial companies, etc. prior to the attacks. The head of the Bundesbank was willing to say this much. I would like to ask the finance minister about these put options. Did the government of Japan know about this, and what do you think about this? I would like to ask Finance Minister Nakaga about this. Finance Minister Fukushiro Nakaga. I was in Burkina Faso in Africa when I heard about this incident. I decided to fly immediately to the US, but when I got to Paris, I was told there were no flights to America. So I only heard what was reported later about the facts. I know there have been reports about the points you raise. So we made it obligatory that people provide ID for securities transactions and for suspicious transactions to be reported, and we made it a crime to provide money to terrorist organizations. We believe the international financial system should not be abused. In any case, terrorism is a horrible thing and must be condemned. This type of terrorism cannot be stopped by one country but needs to be stopped by international society. Mr. Fujita, I would like to ask finance specialist Mr. Osawa to tell me about put options. A group of people with large amounts of money, clear insider information, and financial expertise would have been necessary for such a thing to take place. Could a few terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan carry out such a sophisticated and large-scale set of transactions? I would like to ask Mr. Osawa to respond. Keiichiro Osawa. I understand put options are a deal to sell stocks at a fixed price. In this case, somebody must have had insider information to carry out such transactions, because nobody could normally predict these airlines would have their planes hijacked. So, I believe this was certainly a case of insider trading. Mr. Fujita, Prime Minister, you were Chief Cabinet Secretary at the time, and as somebody has already noted, this was an incident of the sort that humanity had never previously experienced. Also, there appears to be a lot more information about this incident coming out now than came out in the months after the attacks. Now that we are an internet and visual society, this information is being made public, so if we look at the situation now, the whole starting point for these two laws, the start of the war on terror itself, as you have seen from the information I have presented, has not been properly investigated or analyzed. So I do not believe the government has acted properly by investigating this incident or asking the U.S. government for an explanation. So far we have not started refueling US ships yet, so I think we need to go back to the beginning and not just simply and blindly trust the US government explanation and indirect information provided by them. There were too many victims, so I think we need to start again from the beginning. We need to ask who the real victims of this war on terrorism are. I think the citizens of the world are its victims. Here in Japan we have disappearing pensions and disappearing records about victims of hepatitis C contaminated blood, but everything I have presented on facts and confirmable evidence. Let us talk about the vanishing black boxes, vanishing airplanes and vanishing remains. Also, lots of the remains of these buildings have disappeared. Even FMA says that prevented it from carrying out a proper investigation. We need to look at this evidence and ask ourselves what the war on terrorism really is. I can see the ministers nodding in agreement, but I would like to ask Prime Minister Fukuda. Please look at me. I have heard that when you were Chief Cabinet Minister at the time you felt many strange things about these attacks. Do you not think it was strange? Prime Minister Fukuda. I never said I thought it was strange. Mr. Fujita. Prime Minister, what about the origin of the war on terror and the idea of whether it is right or wrong to participate in it? Is there really a reason to participate in this war on terror? Do we really need to participate? I would also like to ask about how to really stop terrorism. Prime Minister Fukuda. We believe, based on evidence provided to us by the U.S. government, that the attacks of 9/11 were carried out by Al-Qaeda. We need to put an end to Al-Qaeda terrorism. That is why international society is united in the fight against terrorism. Here, concerning a law passed by the Democratic Party last year and based on UN Resolution 16595. This is a resolution passed in response to the terrorist attacks on the U.S., so you passed the law agreeing with the UN, didn't you? Mr. Fujita. Did you confirm about the bodies and the facts behind the resolution, because that is why you claim to be participating in this war on terrorism? So I believe to end terrorism we need to pass a law that actually helps the people of Afghanistan. I would like Mr. Inuzuka to talk about the law and about the fight against terrorism. Tadashi Inuzuka. Among the many problems raised by MP Fujita, the thing we need to worry most about is that the people in Afghanistan can live in peace and without worries. That is the core of the issue of ending terrorism. Without discussing this but just operating behind the back lines by supplying oil and not thinking about the entire situation or the people involved, it is nonsense to debate this law. This law should be made for peace and security in Afghanistan. Our country needs to pass a real anti-terror law.